I'm sorry, first of all, that I couldn't be with you. I had a little injury to my knee, and I'm kind of, I look really comfortable, but I'm not. So anyway, I'm really sorry that I couldn't be out in that 15-degree weather to come and see you all, but I'm glad that Dave Neff is here. I don't think Dave needs a big introduction other than to say he runs, I can't say well, he's run a lot of things in Parsons alumni organizations. Of course, he was also with the bank for many, many years, and he does a lot of important things for our entire community. And Dave, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And Lawrence Iyer is here. Lawrence is 30-year history teacher here in town, and also on the board of the Carnegie Museum as well. Lawrence, thanks. Lawrence runs our history for our Fairfield Productions. Let me quickly say Fairfield Productions is the group that puts together documentaries about Fairfield and Jefferson County and this part of Southeast Iowa about our history. We've done 4 films already. Despite the fact that I'm deeply involved in it, we've won many awards. And it's because we really work hard at trying to get the story right and to really bring it to our community in a refreshing and interesting way, and a very high quality films. And each film takes us about 1 year to 2 years to do. So it's a lot of research and a lot of people involved. Almost 100 people are involved in this film that we're doing now, our 5th film, to be called Parsons. It's going to debut at the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center on October the 6th through 8th, and that's coinciding with the Parsons reunion that's going to happen at that time. So we're really thrilled about that. We're really excited. We're also working extremely hard right now as if the film were due tomorrow, but in fact, we've got a few months to go. We're going to start our editing in earnest, although we've done rough editing already, of our interviews. We've done over 30 interviews already. Probably I'll have 35 by the time we're done, from different Parsons alumni and Parsons teachers and administrators, etc. So all in all, we've been working pretty hard at this. But one of the things I was thinking is, as I always do in these films, is what have I missed? You know, who didn't I talk to? Whose stories am I missing out on? And I can only tell you, I know a whole lot now, but I don't know the stories from everybody. And some of those stories, to be totally honest, aren't 100% relevant to the film we're making. Our film is about the history of Parsons College, including its beginnings all the way through till its ending, and the impact that Parsons had. And it's people are saying, oh, is it going to be a hatchet job or very complimentary? I hope it's none of those things. I hope it's just tells the honest story, which I think is good enough. It's a great story about a college that had way more of an impact than I thought when I first started studying it. And we're going to tell the whole story. And I think we're going to tell it in a way that uplifts our community, but at the same time, maybe deepens people's understanding of what Parsons was all about. So that's enough for my commercial about this. I feel like one of those politicians that say, now go to dickdeangelis.com if you want to contribute. No, but if you do want to know more about it, you can go to fairfieldhistoryseries.com and learn all about our program and help out if you want. Each film takes about $50,000 to $60,000 to produce. So it's quite an undertaking, to be frank with you. And I want to thank tonight Werner Elmker and Jason Strong, who are in the back, for helping film this, and Alex at the library here, who's help hosting this. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your support. I think we could start by, I'd like to just hear a story. So who's come from the longest way and wants to start out by telling me a little bit about your experience of Parsons, and then we can discuss it a little and ask more questions of each other and kind of let this process kind of continue that way.
I'm Donovan Amaragan, and I didn't come a whole long ways. I came over from Mount Pleasant. I bypassed Iowa Wesleyan College and came to Parsons. I spent 3 semesters at Ellsworth Junior College, and then they started recruiting me to come to Parsons, and as soon as they did, I was hooked. I was coming here, and I played football here. I actually played on the last football team that we had.
And what year was that?
1970, I believe. We were in St. Louis. I can't recall the team we played, but before we came out, warmed up, and we went back in the locker room, and that's when they told us that that would be the last football game that Parsons would play. They was dropping the game, and that it affected us in different ways, I think. Some of us, of course, we was all sad, but I think it motivated a lot of us to do better and to play harder. And but then I finished up here, graduated in '71 with my degree in teaching, and moved back to Mount Pleasant, live on the farm now, and basically retired from everything except a few cows.
And did you teach?
I was a substitute teacher in Mount Pleasant and coached football for my high school coach, Bob Evans. He approached me, wanted to know what degrees I had and certificates and everything. And I said, well, we closed, but you can contact the University of Iowa because all of our records went to the University of Iowa. So that's what the ladies in the central office did for me, was contact them at Iowa, and found out that I had all my credentials that I could substitute teach. So I done that and coached for Coach Evans for several years.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I up next? My name is Ralph Messerly. I came here in 1965. I'm from Council Bluffs, Iowa. I had a older brother who went to Parsons College, graduated from here, played football here 4 years, and he almost got me to come here, except they didn't have wrestling here, and I was a wrestler. So I went to Maryville, Missouri, Northwest Missouri State, and wrestled down there for him. And after that, I came to Iowa. Well, I stayed on 1 year, did some graduate work down there, and was assistant wrestling coach. And then I came to Iowa and got a job in Eldon, just up the road here, Cardinal High School, because my brother was at Ottumwa, and he found me a job. So anyway, I taught there a couple of years and coached there football and wrestling. And then the job opened up here in Fairfield, and I applied for the job. A friend of mine, Pearl Smith, who used to be the football coach here for years and years and years, sort of recruited me and said, hey, there's a job here, why don't you look into it? And it was wrestling and football, and so I did. And came in 1965. And I stayed on until I retired in 2003. So I was here for 38 years doing that at the high school. Great place to work, great people to work with. We just enjoyed the heck out of them. I was actually wrestling coach here, and Parsons College, what would you say, what was his name, Schlarbaum?
Slaughterbaum?
Yeah, Schlarbaum was a wrestling coach. And late in the fall, he said he got another job. in another community. So he left. John Warr was the athletic director here, and I knew him and had his kids in school. So he says, "Hey, Ralph," called me. He says, "Hey, Ralph, we need a wrestling coach." I said, "Can't do it. I've got a job here." He said, "No, you stay with your job, and we will see if we can get you as the wrestling coach if you'll do it." I said, "Well, sure." So they did. Make a long story short, and I became the wrestling coach at Parsons College. My first team was 1971-72. My second and last team here was 72-73, because at 73 I think they closed. So I was the last wrestling coach that Parsons College had. But we had a couple of pretty good years, decent. It was different. In college, you got to do a lot of recruiting, and we were getting started anyway. I know our first year was we were 5-7, and then the next year I had a year to recruit there, and we were 9-5 or something, 9-3 or something like that. Anyway, it was coming, and we had a lot of fun, had good kids, and so that was my basic story here, and I really enjoyed Fairfield High School. I enjoyed Parsons College. It was just really great. I would have actually gone here had they had wrestling. My background in wrestling is from age 10. I'm 82 years old right now. So I've been associated with it, either wrestling or coaching or doing something with it, refereeing or whatever, for 72 years. So that's my story.
Wow, that's great, Ralph. Thank you.
As principal, did you have student teachers?
Oh, yes. As a principal, I started out as a counselor and coach and that sort of thing. And then I decided to go into administration. And
when was that, Ralph? When did you decide that?
Oh wow, I was a high school principal for 25 years and a assistant principal before that. So
I thought you were. Okay, good.
Yeah, I was. I like the counseling job real well and that sort of thing too. But as an administrator, you get to help make the direction that is better for the kids, and I thought I could help do that. Hopefully I did. But yeah, I was a principal for 25 years. Dave just said something about I also supervise student teachers, and some of them from Parsons and other places around, and I enjoyed that a lot too.
Who were some of the Parsons?
Pardon?
Who were some of the Parsons student teachers that came over that stand out? If you're looking, a lot of them became coaches. I think a lot of the track coaches.
Yes, but that's been too many years ago.
Okay,
I can't remember names,
okay.
but we had some good ones.
Yeah. Well, Hunter Doss, right?
Yeah,
Bill Moore.
Yeah, Bill Moore. Bill Moore.
His wife Siggy.
Yeah.
Now, when did Dan Breen come along? During your time as a principal or before?
Oh yeah, Dan Breen, you bet. Yeah, he was there. We got him. He went over to the middle school first, and then came over to the high school.
Right.
And just it's interesting, but they're getting ready to name this Friday. They're getting ready to name the gymnasium after the Dan Breen Gymnasium. He had a huge impact.
We've interviewed him for the film.
Oh, okay.
No, it's great.
Yeah, it's great.
He was a good teacher and a good coach. I tell you, he was good. Anyway, it's been fun. We were gonna move. We had another place bought down south a ways, and we were gonna move and retire down there. And I can still see us sitting on a porch by the lake, swinging and talking, my wife and I, and we said, why do we want to move down here? Our kids went to school here. They got a great education. We know so many people. This is, been here forever. Let's just sell the place and stay here. And then we can go other places if we want to. That's what we did. So we're here for good.
All right.
There you go.
Can I say one more thing?
Go ahead.
That's what's here. Go.
I forgot to mention, and I should have, sitting over here on my right is my fraternity brother, Dave Neff. We're both SIGEPs at Parsons College.
That's right.
We want to hear some stories about Dave the troublemaker, because all we know Dave now is such an outstanding and upstanding citizen.
Chapter 3 right here for you right now. Let's not tarnish what was a good image. In the town of Washington, Iowa, we have a retired athletic director, baseball coach. And since you interviewed Dwayne Banks, he saw that in the paper and he emailed this afternoon. So I'm going to share from Doug Dunlap. His son Brian is in the faculty and coaching here at the Fairfield High School. So this is Doug Dunlap, retired athletic director, Washington, Iowa. I can't make it tonight, but want to share with you I acquired a Parsons College baseball uniform, and if it happens at the jersey we wore when we beat Florida State 2 days in a row. I also have a Parsons College baseball helmet we wore both batting and on the field. Parsons Baseball sent many players to the majors, and I have baseball cards of each player. I don't know how much coverage is going to be on baseball, but I'll be glad to be a resource if needed. Now we're going to go back to when we did something in 2019, so I'm jumping back a couple years because he saved my email. Dave, after a little deep searching, I found my Parsons baseball memorabilia. I can't add much to Skip's article either than the names of the players at the bottom. Team pictures go from bottom 64, 65, 66, 67. The years I was there, 63 to 67, 67 was our best team. We went 31-2. 31-2. Several players off that team played in the majors, and Dwayne Banks was our coach, who you just interviewed the other day. We beat 7th-ranked Florida State 10-0 and 16-4. I'm going to read that again. We beat 7th-ranked Florida State 10-0 and 16-4. In row 3 of the 67 team, Tom Heintzelman, Jim Todd, Charlie Williams, Ted Remington, Rich Folkers all played in the major leagues. Paul Zahn, Bob Bonilevitz, Tommy Lolis all played in the minor leagues. Jim Zarella served as head baseball coach at the University of Louisville. Tony DiMacio is still a major league scout and was National League Scout of the Year a few years ago. Of course, Coach Dwayne Banks went on to coach University of Iowa for many years. Baseball field that the Hawkeyes play on is named after him, the Dwayne Banks Field. I collected as many baseball cards of guys I played in my 4 years and attached photos for the back of the day. So this is what he sent as an email. Sad news is several players have passed away since our playing days. List includes Tom Lolis, Skip Falacio, Dick Mills, Charlie Williams, and Paul Zahn, to the best of my knowledge. So here is another resource in addition to Dwayne Banks. If you want to know where some of these guys went and you want to talk to him, I'll make a connection for you.
You know, I spoke to Larry Litwin about it when you and I spoke with him, and you know also about me, Dave, that I'm a big baseball fan. Of course, I'm a big everything, but I'm a big baseball fan, and I probably could do a whole movie about baseball in Iowa. As you know, the last film I did, we had something about Fairfield's first baseball team back in 1867, and we have pictures and great stories of that team. And unfortunately, you know, this was a team that lost its first big game against Washington. And I don't remember if any of you remember. Do you? It was my film, but it was something like 37-12 or something like that. It was a pretty lopsided loss. But I will tell you this, when we interviewed Dwayne Banks, he said one thing. I said, Dwayne, how do you recruit guys that, I think Dwayne's record as a coach for 2 years or 2.5 years was something like 90-10. I've got it all on, you know, obviously written down, but he said, I recruited guys who hated to lose. And I love that. I remembered that. As soon as he said it, I said, oh, I like that. And he goes, because I hate to lose. He goes, I hate to lose. And he told me the whole story behind the coach of the Florida team. They kind of took the Parsons schedule because they figured, oh, good, we can get 2 more wins in and a doubleheader. And so they weren't taking him maybe as seriously the first game. And they said, what the heck was that? You know, and he goes, well, we're not going to let that happen again. And the coach said something like, oh, yes, actually, you are going to let that happen. That is going to happen again. We're going to beat you a second time. And sure enough, they did. I thought that's a fun interview. I look forward to sharing that with you all. We actually interviewed him at the Dwayne Banks Field in the background. So it said Banks Field, and it was, and he was in prime form. It was really a fun interview. So thank you for that, and I will get the contact information, and maybe we can have a conversation with him.
I'd like to add 2 things for you here to supplement when Don Van Aberhagen said they played Tennessee A&I at Busch Stadium. Jefferson Street Joe Gillum, that went on to pro football fame, was the quarterback that they played against on that. Item number 2, Parsons basketball. I don't know if you've done too much with that. You've talked to Dan Breen. He's sort of modest at times. Have you ever heard of Gonzaga basketball? Parsons played them home on home. They came to Fairfield and they went out to Gonzaga and played. So they had some pretty tough competition too.
Well, you know, I think you know, Dave, that we interviewed Obie Nelson's son, and he gave us quite a bit of fun information and stories. My favorite story that he told me was that Obie was very vociferously arguing a bad call that he felt was made, and he went all the way out on the court, and the referee turned to him and said, Obie, I'm going to give you a technical for every step it takes you to get back to that bench. And so Obie got on his hands and knees and crawled back to the bench, and he didn't get a technical.
Ralph's got something.
I just got a question. Who was the coach, baseball coach, prior to Banks? He's from Arkansas or Mississippi?
Yeah, he was a pro baseball player,
yeah.
And I can't pull his name up.
I can't remember. I have it in my interview, but I can't remember the name.
I knew Banks, and this guy before him, Jim something. Anyway, he did a lot of things around it. I got to know some of those guys, and he was one of them. And he called me one day and says, "Hey, I took a class for him, covered one of his classes." And so he says, "Hey, I owe you a meal." I said, "What for?" And he said, "Cover my class." And I said, "Okay." So we went out someplace, and he said, I said, "What are we going to have?" He says, "I got to set up for you. It's hominy and grits." I don't even know what it was. And I says, "I'm not going to eat that stuff." He says, "You got to eat it. You got to eat it." So I ate it, and I can't say that I liked it, but I ate it. Anyway, those guys were good guys.
I'd like to add one more thing about the football team. We had a young man come over, Mike Hennigan from Washington, Iowa. And he went on, I don't know where he went after we closed, but he went on and played professional football for several years. But he started here at Parsons College. And he was a pretty good, I think he played for a team in the South, maybe the Falcons or somebody, but he played professional football after he graduated.
Mike went on to be an administrator. He was principal at the Oskaloosa Middle School for a 10-year time period.
I'm interested, are there any people who have any memories of, right now I'm in the midst of studying as things changed in the 60s. Part of that is what Parsons was all about. Let's say the politics of Parsons, the professors, the dissidents, the this, the that. There's layers and layers and layers. Millard Roberts, the enemies list, if you will, the people he put around him to make his programs work. I'm very familiar with the successes of the programs and how things came out. But I'm also interested in, I have a few people who've been talking to me and said, Dick, you know, all these things that happened in Parsons in the 60s, part of that was because of the 60s. It was a tumultuous time from the early 60s to the end of the 60s are two totally different eras in American history. If you think about the music, because I'm a music guy, you know, you went from Kingston Trio to Jimi Hendrix, okay? Kind of in less than 10 years. That's a pretty big move, you know? As opposed to Bing Crosby to Frank Sinatra or something like that. You've gone, you know, a short period of time, and the Vietnam War obviously was a huge part of that. I just interviewed somebody, Dave, I'm going to say Hetzler. I might have that wrong, but pretty close.
Dave Williams? Dave Williams?
No, that's another guy who I also interviewed, but or talked to. But Dave Hetzler was in charge of the students against the Vietnam War. Here's a certain title. I'm going to try to see if I can get it real quick for you. Yeah. Students for Nonviolent Settlement in Vietnam. He tells this great story of how the students were getting together and trying to do a protest, a peaceful protest on the square. But that he got called into Millard Roberts' office in 1976 and basically was told this was not a good idea. You know, that there are a lot of people that would offend, and VFW people were there. Simmons, the police person in charge of police was there, police chief, and Robert Fox was there, who was, I think, the dean of men at the time, and he said it was really quite a meeting, but he said, no, we're set on this. We're going to go to the square in Fairfield and have this protest. And he said, you know, it ended up being a big police presence there. The students came out there. They voiced their objections to the war, but there were no violence, no problems. And they all shook hands at the end, said, you guys handled yourselves really well. But he says, you know, there were a lot of really strong opinions. And actually, he said that Dr. Roberts encouraged people to have these debates and bring in different ideas. He was telling me some of the people Dr. Roberts personally brought in to speak, you know, as you know, from the what we would call today the far left and the far right and everything you know, in between. He wanted people to have healthy discussions, but he did. I thought that was just an interesting story because a number of people have told me that for example, I'm learning all about the Black Student Union that was there at the end of the 60s. It was a very strong African-American kind of group of students there. That wasn't the case as much in the early 60s. Certainly it wasn't the case in America. It wasn't quite the same, right? So anybody have any comments about that? I know it's a little more controversial, but I thought I'd just ask you.
I'm going to say something before I forget it because I'm getting to that point in my life. We were talking about Gonzaga, Tennessee A&I, and other things. Does anybody remember the name Bruce Jenner?
Yeah, sure.
A decathlete. I took my track team over to Graceland down at Lamoni, Iowa, and Coach L.D. Weldon gets us all huddled up. He said, we got a coaches meeting. Come on over here. He says, I need a little extra time today. I got a young man that's going to run 10 events. He needs a little rest time between. He says, you don't know who he is, but you might remember the name Bruce Jenner. So our Parsons kids competed against Jenner when he was a collegiate athlete at Graceland University.
That's great. That's a great story. He was some athlete too.
Do you remember Charlie Barnett?
Pass that.
Do you remember Charlie Barnett?
Charlie Barnett, sure do.
He was the admissions counselor there. When I was a counselor and a principal, well, Charlie Barnett, I used to spend a lot of time with him because he's always recruiting Fairfield High School kids to go there, see?
Sure.
And so we got to be really close. I had two brothers that went there, Parsons. One graduated from there and one transferred later. But anyway, they were good friends of his. That's how I got to know him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had a boy that was good there. But we just, Charlie was just over there at the high school a lot, and we just kind of gave him the run of things because he was so good to our kids. I mean, he just, he made sure that if they needed money, he made sure somehow they got it. And so we were really appreciative of him.
Hey, Ralph, I have a question. How many ballpark, I mean, just an idea of how big of a feeder was Parsons, Fairfield High School to Parsons? Of course, when you're talking about 5,000 students, it's a drop in a bucket. But would you say 10 kids went to Parsons out of a graduating class, or 100, or 50, or 20, or?
Wow, you mean how many
How many FHS graduates would go to Parsons?
Oh, a lot. I mean, it was just so cheap for them to go, not because it was that cheap at the school, but they lived in Fairfield, and so that made it helpful. And then this Charlie Barnett, who was the admissions counselor, I'm telling you, he was just a great guy, and he made, if a kid couldn't go, he found a way to help get him some money to go. And that was really great. So we had a large number went there. We just did.
Ballpark, 50 a year
Oh,
25 a year?
I'd say somewhere in that 30-ish range, sometimes more, sometimes less.
Okay.
But yeah, we went.
How many would you have in a high school graduating class at that time?
Oh,
100, 150?
no, we had over 200.
200.
Yeah.
Fairfield was always pretty good size.
Yeah, we had 200, 220,
Okay.
somewhere in there. Yeah.
So that's between 10 and 20% of the students maybe would go? Something like that?
10 to 20% of your student body graduating would head over to Parsons.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's right. We had a bunch, and it depended on the year, of course, too. But we had our share and then some go there. They treated us well.
And I'm not saying this to put a negative cast on the university now or anything like that, but it's not like that now. And we've got a university there. They're doing great things and everything, but there was a different relationship with the town and the college with Parsons as there is certainly with MIU. And I just wanted to kind of understand, I'm seeing a lot of pictures of the parades and the Hell Weeks and the, motorcycle groups and and I'm just trying to, I'm looking at Fairfield now, and you don't see any of that. Now, part of that is the way the world is now. You don't see it you used to see this in other colleges as well. You don't see it as much. Having said that, it certainly was a big change for the town. And like I said, I don't call this, I just call the history as we see it, right? And I think it's important. It's been 50 years since Parsons even has been around. It's important to tell the story just the way it was. And some of the things you take for granted, and I think that it's good to understand it in the light of kind of what it did for our town. How, when I got here in 75, the mayor was from Parsons, the guy at the bank was from Parsons, the principal was from, what I mean, connected, everybody was connected to Parsons, and there was no Parsons. But it was still live and active in Fairfield. And I'm just kind of, many of the teachers at Fairfield High School, so, were there, and I just think that that's a story. That's part of the history of Fairfield.
Do you recall Cello Werder? Cello Werder was the football coach here for years, quite a few years. He really made it a strong program. And he did a lot, not just for Parsons College and their football, but for our school system. He was just one of those kind of guys. He was over there. He had kids go, 2 kids that went to school there, and he helped. And there's another example of the relationship with Parsons versus the high school, and he helped a lot there too. We just really enjoyed him and had a lot of respect for him. So there's just another one.
Thank you. That's great.
One of the displays that we still have at the Fairfield Arts and Convention Center in the Alumni Hall is how many teachers in the Fairfield District are graduates of Parsons College. And I'm going from a head count, I think 40 to 45 that we have displayed with their photos, what year they graduated, and what school, high school, middle school, Lincoln, wherever they taught. So you talk about students going to Parsons students, student taught, they liked them, and they were hired in the Fairfield Community School District.
By the way, Dave, just for your information too, when Parsons closed, we must have hired at least 6 or 8 that first year. We were just glad to get them on our staff. And we happen to have some openings, but that you have to have that. But they were, very young, and some of those people. I mean, we had in math, science.
Yeah, you had Rail, you had Tree, you had Martha Flinchby, you had very young.
Yep.
You had a whole select
Yeah,
group
we did.
of faculty that made the move to the school
Yep.
district.
Yep.
And we interviewed Dr. Tree before he passed, Martha Flinchbaugh, and Vera Young for the film. So good people and huge contributions to our community. I don't think that's quite, we hear about some of the famous people, but some of the people who just were here and, like you said, plugged in some of the gaps and were there for our community when we needed them. And it ends up, I think Fairfield gained a lot by having those people because they wanted to stay in the community,
And Dick, that kind of relationship between town and gown, in terms of the school system and the college, isn't found everywhere. When I coached tennis at Grinnell College, I saw right away it's a small town. There's schools been there since 1840s. There's no reason on paper why they shouldn't have that same mutual help from high school to college and back. Not found. So to have this amazing kind of relationship where it was really a pipeline for teachers and coaches to come out of Parsons and then enrich the public school system,
Yes, for sure.
it's remarkable, even here in Iowa, where small towns value their colleges and welcome their graduates.
And then this guy gives us all lessons in tennis. I never saw such a coach. My goodness, my son was coach at Fairfield High School, and he was just kicking tail. It was good. It was good.
Yeah, he one heck of a coach. I was going to say, I've been studying Millard Roberts and his writings and his theories and so on so much that when you mentioned Grinnell College not having that relationship, Lawrence, the first thing I thought in my brain, because that's because they're such snobs. And that's only because I've been studying his relationship with some of the people at Grinnell and how it got somewhat antagonistic over time. And they felt, he wasn't following the rules of how to do education properly, and of course he was feeling like some of those rules were outdated. I think he was probably absolutely right. Maybe he didn't go about it the right way, but he certainly, I just think it's funny how it's affected my brain because I now look at Grinnell a little differently now that I've seen all these writings from these people who are like, well, this is not the way educators in the state of Iowa should be behaving, that he wants to make a profit out of college, education and bring in all these, basically loser students and say that he's trying to educate them. But in fact, I think that's exactly what he was doing. I can't tell you how many students I've talked to who are pretty awful students when they came to Parsons, but eventually kind of got enough partying out of their system or whatever and started saying, you know what? I kind of am interested in this field. I better start learning about it. And all of a sudden, they actually made great strides in their life. It just took somebody who had a little patience, maybe, a program that was suited to that kind of student. And I think Parsons certainly, despite some problems with finances and so on, certainly had an idea that was, in my opinion, well ahead of its time.
I just want to make sure that you also, we talked about our kids from the high school went to Parsons College, a lot of them and so forth. Well, keep this in mind too. Parsons College faculty had some awfully sharp students themselves who came to our high school, and that helped our high school too. See, so it was a two-way street.
Yes, that's a really good point. So the faculty's children, you mean?
They had some really sharp kids, and they fit in with our groups real well and helped our overall student body. So that was good too.
Does anybody have any stories to tell? I'm interested in the story about when you kind of were in Mount Pleasant, you were told about Parsons and so on. Do you remember who came out to talk about Parsons, or how they encouraged you to come, or what the recruiting process was, and maybe the first time you came on campus, what that was like?
There was a young man ahead of me, Tom Young, that played for Coach Evans also. And Tom come over here and played football. He was probably 5 years ahead of me. I'm not sure exactly. And I'm not sure where his wife's from, Maryland, but she's also a Parsons graduate. And they came back to Mount Pleasant and taught in our school system. And I really wasn't sure about college when I was in high school. I lived on a farm. I thought, well, that's what I'll do is farm. And then I had some pretty good success in football, and there were some scholarships offered. Well, I settled on Ellsworth Junior College, and like I said, for 3 years, and that's when Parsons then came back to me, and it was just a no-brainer. This is where I'm coming, and I really, enjoyed it. I remember some of the guys there. John Lanier, he was from East St. Louis. He was a fullback. And you couldn't have found a better one. Bill Moore, that teaches here in Fairfield, he was on the team. Alan Schaffner was a guard, played next to me. My junior year and then my senior year, they moved me to defense. But I don't know, it just clicked for me. This is where I wanted to come. I seen them a few times come to Mount Pleasant, and they played that little college we got over there, Iowa Wesleyan, and I seen their team, and after I came over and visited, I just knew this is where I wanted to come, and it was quite a shock that day in St. Louis that they told us this is the last game. It was quite a shock, but and I remember Dave. Dave's a fraternity brother, and seen Dave quite a few times, and I see Tom Young and Marilyn there in Mount Pleasant. They're both Parsons graduates, and Tom and I talk about the old days of football here and things. And
so talk, if you don't mind, because I'm not. When you did get word that the program was closing, was it a sign that? Was it a feeling that the college was in decline? Obviously, the attendance, the student, body numbers were coming down a little bit. I know they were going through accreditation problems and then got reaccredited around that time. I know some people were really, enthusiastic. Hey, it's going to do well. But when something like that happens, in your brain, is there anything going on that says, boy, this is not the Parsons I thought it was going to be, or something like that?
No, not really. I don't think at that time. I think we were really, Coach Blix and Coach Reed had us focused on the game, and until after the game. Then after the game, we had some different emotions and feelings about it. But just before, when they announced it, and during the game, I don't think we had any of those feelings. But afterwards, we were a pretty sad bunch down there in the dressing room, and you know, we were pretty sad, and of course, I was a senior then, and there was some young guys like Mike Hennigan from Washington that still had a couple more years of eligibility, and you felt sorry for them because we really didn't know, they didn't know how they'd be accepted to go to another college or what colleges would be interested in them. But we just, you know, we didn't talk much about it then during the game. We just focused on the game. But on the way home, we talked about it and had different discussions. And
do you remember whether you won or lost that game?
we lost.
Played a future NFL quarterback, so that might have made it a little easier in Tennessee A&I.
It was close, but unfortunately, we did lose.
Well, I can't imagine how you could even play, never mind play competitively. It took a lot of focus and a good group of guys that were probably loved the idea of at least playing one last time together.
That's right, we did, and you know, and I, like I said earlier, when Parsons come to Ellsworth and recruited me, there was just no question. I was coming here. I really enjoyed all the guys that I played with. They were dedicated. The coaches were dedicated. I remember we did not have, at that time, a weight room on campus. There was the National Guard Armory out here on the west edge of town, west edge of the city limits. That's where we had our weight room. And we went out there and we lifted weights, and we all, you know, the underclassmen, we all worked pretty hard for that senior year. We didn't know that was going to be the whole end of everything, but we worked pretty hard and we lifted weights and had spring practice, and it was, but.
Now tell me something, when you were recruited, do you remember who came out there to Ellsworth to recruit you, and a little bit of the pitch or anything?
Larry Blix and Paul Reed came, and I don't remember much about their talk, because I really had, when I first got that first letter from them, I had kind of made up my mind that if they do come to Ellsworth to talk to me, I'm going to go. So that's what I done. I can remember at that time Ellsworth had no boys' dorms. All the boys lived off campus, and we had a really nice apartment. Two other guys that I played football at Mount Pleasant with, Marvin Anderson and Rick Beavers, and they came, Parsons came, and I told them right away, Marvin and Rick, that I'm going at semester. I'm going, and I don't remember exactly who all came and talked to me. I talked to two or three of the coaches, but it was just a click for me that that's where I wanted to come, and I'm glad I came. I'm really glad I came. There was people like Dave that I met through the fraternity and through the school. Of course, Bill Moore and his wife Sig still teach here in Fairfield. Bill was on the team and stuff. So, and Dan Breen and.
Yeah, you got a good group there that you got associated with. I have one last question about this, because I'm interested just in the general scope of junior colleges, which seem to crop up in the United States in general a lot more in the late 60s and so on. So I felt like one of the things Parsons addressed, got addressed in some small degree at least by these junior colleges, which is they were a place that somebody who maybe didn't have great grades could work on their grades. Still is that case. You see it all the time that a kid will go to junior college for a year or two and then go to the University of Iowa or go somewhere else. Am I right in that thinking based on what you experienced? Did you feel like there were more junior colleges kind of cropping up? Because I think one of the things Parsons obviously hit is people who needed a little help with their grades in some way, a little more assistance than your kid who's going to go to a real top-notch college, and they have the wherewithal or they can get the scholarships, but they can't. They need some assistance to get themselves in the mode of being a student. Right. Tell me a little bit about what your thinking is on that.
Well, my experience was in high school. I didn't take books home and study. You studied some in your study halls, but I really was not going to be a college student. When I entered my senior year, we were hoping, of course all of us were hoping that we'd have a good senior season. We did. And it was kind of surprising to me in a way that there was a lot of college contacted me about coming and playing. And Coach Evans, I still say, and I know these gentlemen from Fairfield, we battled with Pearl Smith over here, and but Coach Evans was a fine coach and a mentor. He would talk to you and good, straight talk. I mean, he didn't beat around the bush and make you feel like you're going to go to college and you're going to be an all-star. He didn't do that, but he talked to you about, if you work and you do things, you can do pretty well. And I remember when they came to Ellsworth to talk to me, I just knew right away I wanted to come here, and I got a good education, a really good education. And my doctors, the professors, all were top-notch. I believe his name was Dr. Weir, if I remember right. I had him for a class, and there was only 5 or 6 of us in this class, but he really worked with us, and we divided up in teams, 2 on a team, to do some different work and stuff in class. And I really worried, though, about some of the lectures. I'd go in, there'd be 50 or 60 or 90 in a lecture hall. That was a little different for me. But all the teachers, the professors, all worked with you and helped you and guided you along. And, of course, the football coaches, I thought, were tremendous.
That's great. Ralph, do you have anything to say about the growth of junior colleges and what they offered compared to what Parsons did?
He's asking about the Iowa junior colleges where kids from Fairfield High would go. Were they getting to be so popular that more kids would siphon off to a junior college instead of going to Parsons?
Yeah, that happened some.
Okay.
Yeah, that happened some. For a long time, junior colleges were not. They had the thing that they didn't really want to go to. A lot of kids didn't want to go to junior college. They wanted to go right straight to college, a 4-year college, and we still had. One of my jobs as a counselor to try to, work with them so that they get where they can have the most success. And so some kids needed to go to the junior college first, and others were ready for the 4-year college first. But I think probably, as I think back over it, an awful lot of kids could go to the to Parsons College as opposed to going to the junior college because of the expenses. You know, if they stayed here and lived at home, they saved a lot of money. And so a lot of them did it for that reason, you know. But junior colleges actually, as time went on, they became a lot more popular for kids. And part of the reason was the cost. The cost wasn't as big in a lot of, at least around here. And so, yeah, we had quite a few go there, but I think Parsons took a lot of our kids who maybe in another community would have gone to junior college. I really think that. But yeah, and so it was good for us, our kids. I want to say one word about, you mentioned Al Schaffner.
Yes.
Al Schaffner. Al Schaffner was my assistant coach when I was coaching at the college, and he, you know, of course, lived here and worked here and went through Parsons, and so he was a tremendous asset for me because I wasn't out at the college all the time. I was working at the high school, but Al was doing all the stuff that needed to be done on the college campus, and so it worked out very well for him. I have the greatest respect for him. He was just he was a good guy, Just another one that I was lucky to have some of the good guys that I had to work with. It was really good. All these people were mentioned. So anyway, but I hope I answered your question there. But
no, that was great. I appreciate it. Thank you. And is there anybody else that's here that we haven't heard from that has an interest in making saying something about Parsons?
I'm St. Louis. I'm just interested. I was about the same time I graduated high school in 65, out in 70. Army, I went in the Army. The Army was after me at that time with Vietnam, and the draft was going on and all that. So I was involved in all that when I was in college. I moved up here. I came here first in 75. I learned TM in 72. So my experiences after Parsons closed up and everything. But I'm interested in the history of it.
Yeah. You know, as a person that came to MIU in 75, I didn't know anything about Parsons other than that it went out of business. So for me, this whole process has been a fabulous learning experience. I probably know as much as anybody now, except for Lawrence, because he's the one that reads the books and then tells me what happened. But about the earliest days of education in the 1840s and 50s in Fairfield, the first school that came about in Jefferson County, and then the first one in Fairfield with a lady named Clarissa Sawyer, who was part of the Congregational Church in Denmark and in Denmark, Iowa, and she was, best as we could tell, was sent here by a fellow named Isa Turner. And Isa Turner, I guess, was connected to a guy named Waugh, which is a name that has been around Jefferson County a long time, actually. Anyway, Waugh had a place called the Restoration House. And up on the upstairs of the Restoration House, which was, I think, a temperance hotel, wasn't it, Lawrence? This lady taught, at that time, education was just Christian, for good Christian kids. Well, there are a couple kids, Waugh's kids, a guy named Gage, if you ever know about Fairfield history, and another family. Their kids were a part of this, and she only lasted a few years, got married, and went off and taught in Ottumwa later on. But the next guy came along, and then the next person started a college, and that lasted a year or so. And then somebody started another college for women only, female seminary. And eventually, there was actually a law passed that said that Fairfield would have a college here that would be part of the state university. And so we actually built a building of 7 planned buildings. And as soon as that building was built and they started actually looking to operate it, a derecho came and the building got totally destroyed. And from that point on, there was no more buildings for the state university, even though they never rescinded that. Fairfield still has the official approval of a state university. Nobody knows that except for a few people like us. But another idea came along. Finally, there was a teacher who was teaching. Lawrence, you can correct me if I'm a little off. He was teaching at was it Axline University? And then the Parsons brothers came, and there's a long story there, but basically they make a decision, and a few people had a vote on it, and this guy who was a teacher was part of the board. And he's
his job, but he voted for it. They should have Parsons.
Even though he was making a little money teaching and had something going, he said, no, it's better for us to actually have a real college. So he voted for it and voted himself out of the job. And I thought that was pretty cool. The way the whole thing got started is a very interesting story. And we'll tell a little bit of that in our film. I just want you to know, matter of fact, Lawrence and I were laughing because this was supposed to be a boys' college. But girls showed up on the first day and started registering.
So they said, well, you're in the college, come on in.
Sure.
And so they said, well, if they're going to pay, then we're a co-ed college. And that's the way Parsons became a co-ed college. I thought you might enjoy some of these stories that we've been researching, some of which won't even make it in the film, but we're doing a lot of homework to try to understand each period of time, how it fits into our country's history, our state's history, our town's history. And then what I'm thinking of Parsons a little more like a human being. It had a birth. It had, young years. It had middle years. It had its prime years. And it had its decline and finally its death. And all of it is part of history. It may be sad to think of some of it for some of us that maybe went there and maybe even reveled in the real glory days of it. You don't want to think about when it passed. Like I don't want to think about when my dad passed because I want to think about all the great things he did and the great times he had. But it's part of the story. And so we're going to tell the whole story, not putting too much attention on any one part, probably making somebody mad by the time they watch the film because we didn't tell about their fraternity or their sorority or too much about. I could tell just about sports for a good hour easily about Parsons and have it be a pretty interesting movie. But that's not what this movie is going to be about. We will. Obviously, sports are a part of it, but I want you to know that if there's ever anything you come across where you think like, oh, these guys would want to know about this. This is really an important part of the whole picture. Please keep us in mind because we want to get this story as right as we can. And history is something that I take really seriously. I think it's fun. It's funny sometimes. It's all that. I have a good time with it. To be totally honest, I'm having the time of my life. I've had a lot of fun successes in my life. This is by far the most fun I've ever had. Meeting people like you that came tonight and some of the people who watch this on video later on. I just want everybody to know that I take the responsibility of telling our town's history very seriously, but I also take it with a big light heart because it's fun. It tells us where we were. When you learn about early Parsons days, it'll make more sense the Parsons that you attended, and to me, that is part of it. When we get to interview a lady who's 103 years old and attended Parsons in 1938, it brings a whole new perspective to the thing, you know? So anyway, yes.
I'd like to add one more thing I'd forgotten. I had to ask Dave. Frank Folks was the line coach at Parsons that I played for. And I was sitting here all night and I couldn't remember it, so I finally asked Dave. But Frank Folks, and he was one heck of a good football coach. He taught you a lot and he worked with you a lot. So I owe a lot to him too.
And you went on to teach did you work with football in Mount Pleasant too?
Yes, after a few years not using my degree, I run on to Coach Evans one day at a little restaurant there in Mount Pleasant, and he asked me what degrees I had and all this stuff, and I told him. And of course, Parsons had closed, so all my records were at the University of Iowa. So the ladies in our central office said, well, they could get a hold of those for me, and they got them. And Coach Evans then hired me to coach for him, and then I done that for about 5 years for Coach Evans, and then who took over for Coach Evans? Bob Jensen took over, and I coached for Bob probably another 3 years.
Nice. You know, those coaches that coached you, they have an influence more than just the games you played, but sometimes on with the kind of coach you were, And I think a lot of coaches feel like when they work with the kids, they're not just working with, on their game that day or that year or that week, but helping them with their life. I'll tell you one quick, funny, kind of cute story. I used to coach Little League, right, as many people do, and I love baseball. When my kids were growing up here, I coached, and there was one kid that was a big kid, he's heavy set, and I was always a good hitter. I couldn't run very fast, but I could always hit the ball. So I told him, his name was Jimmy, and I said, Jimmy, someday you're going to hit the heck out of the ball. He goes, Coach, I can't hit worth a darn. I said, Jimmy, you're a big guy. You're coordinated. The muscles will grow and come together, and your coordination will get better. And all you got to remember, and then I worked on a few little simple things with him. The idea I had with the kids was try not to hit it over the fence. Try to hit it through the fence was the idea. Hit it hard, because in Little League, if you hit it hard, most of the kids are going to miss, if you can hit a ball hard enough. So anyway, Jimmy ended up being our best home run hitter the next year, and so on. So I'm going down, I'm at Hy-Vee probably, 6, 8 years later, maybe 10. And there's a kid at the checkout, tall, thin kid, probably 6'4", 6'3". And he goes, hey, Coach, as he's checking me out. He was the assistant manager. He goes, hey, Coach. I said, hello. I said, nobody calls me Coach anymore. He goes, you don't know who I am? And it said James. I didn't know him as James, right? He goes, it's me, Jimmy. And he goes, this guy was the best coach I ever had. He really taught me to believe in myself. And I thought about it. I thought, that's probably the best thing somebody could say. For those of you who coached in high school and college, that to have an influence in somebody's life, it's a very humbling thing, and it's also extremely rewarding. Makes all those times that you spend extra working with kids and so on. It wasn't just about the games, it was about how they looked at their life, and I got that a lot from Dwayne, Coach Banks. You could tell that was what he was about, And I heard a lot of people tell me that about Obie Nelson. They said the same thing. His outlook was kind of contagious, So anyway, I know a lot of you are teachers, coaches, and I just wanted to thank you for your service to your communities. It makes a huge difference on people's lives, not just in the sports and the wins and losses. Thank you. All right. Well, any other thing? If there's nothing else, I think we covered a bunch of things. I'd invite you to go check out our films if you haven't seen them. They're at fairfieldhistoryseries.com, and you can see any of the films right from there. You can click on them, or you can order DVDs if you like DVDs. They're even locally at everybody's. And I say that also for the people watching on the videos. A lot of people want to catch up on the series. We are doing 8 films. So this is the 5th one. The next one will be on MIU and when Maharishi came to town and what happened to the community and changed. And I think historically, most people sit there and go, well, isn't that a little new? I said, well, that school's been here almost 50 years now. And you can't even believe that, And then the last 7th one will be on the artists and musicians of this area and the impact they've had all the way through its history. And then the last one will be on the future of Fairfield, the future of this area, and some of the people we've met and the amazing new economies that are going on underneath even the regular business that's happening in town. There are little micro economies and artist groups and farming innovations that, as we did our different films, we'll get to look at the future. I always like the future movies about the future of something because I'm reminded of when my mom promised me that everybody would have jetpacks by the time I was 40 years old and be traveling around in jetpacks. And it didn't quite happen that way. But they also said that we'd all be talking on a very portable thing and have it like a TV and be able to talk to each other and see each other's faces. So they got 1 out of 2 right. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Dave Neff, Lawrence Iyer, and our guests. Really appreciate it. Fairfield Media Center and Werner Elmker. I'll see you all later, and I look forward to hearing from you. Give me a call. Lawrence will have my information. You're more than welcome to give us a buzz and tell us more, or if you have any pictures or films or anything like that, we're always open to learning more. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot.